In the heart of Oakland, the 7-Eleven store on Harrison Street stood as a community hub, a place where locals would gather for late-night snacks or a quick chat with the friendly security guard James Johnson. The Adams Point neighborhood was familiar with his towering figure, a 59-year-old man known for his kindness and unwavering commitment to keeping the store safe. One fateful Friday night, tragedy struck the 7-Eleven community. James, affectionately called JJ by regulars, was shot and killed during a robbery inside the store. As news of the incident spread, shock and grief enveloped the neighborhood. Among the crowd that gathered outside the 7-Eleven, a woman named Snow collapsed on the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face. James Johnson was not just a security guard, he was her father. In between sobs, she spoke about her father's dedication to protecting the 7-Eleven family. "He was protecting the family at 7-Eleven, 'cause I know how my father is. He would do that for anyone he cared and loved," Snow said, her voice breaking with emotion. The store, just a block from Lake Merritt, had become more than just a place to purchase convenience items. It was a tight-knit community where the customers felt a sense of belonging, largely due to James's warm presence. "He was a great man. He was a very great man. He was one of those guys who would give you anything if you needed anything," Snow continued, wiping away her tears. Longtime customers echoed Snow's sentiments, describing James as a protector and a kind-hearted individual. Joseph Silva, a regular at the 7-Eleven, emphasized James's positive impact on the community. "James is a good person, good for the community, and this guy helped everybody and took care of everybody here," Silva remarked, shaking his head in disbelief. As the news of James's tragic death spread, the neighborhood began to reflect on the escalating crime in Oakland. The 7-Eleven had become a target for criminals, with multiple incidents in recent weeks. "Criminals have repeatedly targeted the 7-Eleven stores in Oakland," a somber Joseph Silva noted, referencing the recent shooting outside another 7-Eleven and a brazen robbery involving 8 gunmen just a couple of weeks ago. Amid the grief and shock, Snow revealed the personal toll the situation had taken on her family. Her mother, Julie Johnson, had passed away only 10 months ago. Now, with her father gone, Snow found herself with few family members left. "She died 4 days before my birthday, and I just found out from my little brother that my dad died," Snow said, her voice tinged with a mix of sorrow and frustration. The 7-Eleven on Harrison Street had become a symbol of the challenges facing Oakland. Brian Wolcott, another member who frequented the store, reflected on the senseless violence that seemed to be gripping the city. "Oakland is dangerous right now. Things need to change," Wolcott remarked, voicing a sentiment shared by many in the community. As the investigation unfolded, the police revealed that they had surveillance footage of the shooting, but had made no arrests as of yet. The 7-Eleven community was left grappling with grief, anger, and a thirst for justice. In the days that followed, the 7-Eleven store became a makeshift memorial for James Johnson. Flowers, candles, and handwritten notes adorned the entrance, a testament to the impact he had on the lives of those in the neighborhood. Detective Linda Martinez, assigned to the case, was determined to bring justice to James and his grieving family. She spent hours reviewing surveillance footage, looking for any clues that could lead to the identification of the perpetrator. One evening, as Detective Martinez sifted through the footage, she noticed a suspicious figure lingering near the store just before the incident. The individual's face was obscured, but their movement seemed calculated. Determined to crack the case, Detective Martinez intensified her efforts, canvassing the neighborhood for witnesses and information. During her investigation, Detective Martinez discovered a pattern of criminal activity targeting 7-Eleven stores in Oakland. The convenience of the late-night hours made these stores vulnerable, attracting criminals looking for easy targets. In a tense meeting with the local community, Detective Martinez shared her findings and urged residents to be vigilant. The 7-Eleven community, still grieving the loss of James Johnson, responded with a renewed sense of unity. They organized neighborhood patrols and worked closely with law enforcement to ensure the safety of their community. As the weeks passed, Detective Martinez's relentless pursuit of justice yielded results. A tip from a concerned citizen led her to a suspect with a history of involvement in similar crimes. The evidence began to align, and the case against the perpetrator strengthened. In a dramatic turn of events, the suspect was apprehended, and the community breathed a collective sigh of relief. The arrest brought a sense of closure to the grieving 7-Eleven community, which had rallied together in the face of tragedy. The trial that followed was a somber affair, attended by members of the 7-Eleven community, including Snow. The courtroom echoed with the weight of loss and the determination to see justice served. The perpetrator, facing charges for robbery and murder, was held accountable for the senseless act that had claimed James Johnson's life. As the trial concluded, Snow stood outside the courthouse, grateful for the closure, but forever changed by the events that had unfolded. The 7-Eleven community, though scarred by tragedy, emerged stronger and more united than ever. In the aftermath of James Johnson's death, the 7-Eleven on Harrison Street became a symbol of resilience. The store reopened its doors, and a plaque in James's honor was displayed near the entrance. The community continued to gather, sharing stories of the man who had become a guardian of their late-night haven. While the wounds were deep, the 7-Eleven community found solace in the knowledge that justice had been served. As they moved forward, they remained vigilant, determined to protect the place that had been both a sanctuary and a scene of heartbreaking loss. The memory of James Johnson lived on in the hearts of those who frequented the 7-Eleven on Harrison Street, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, a community could come together and stand strong.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. What is it now, Peter? I shouted in frustration when he asked me to stop the car for the third time. I'm thirsty, he said in an apologetic tone. Are you being serious, dude? First, you stopped the car to pee. Second time, you had to pee again, and now you're feeling thirsty? Why? So you can stop for the fourth time to pee again? At this rate, we are never going to make it to Marcus's wedding, I scolded him in frustration. This is the last time, dude, I promise, Peter requested. Fine, I'll stop if we see any store open at this hour, I sighed and said. After that, I focused my attention on the road while Peter's eyes were looking for a store. That was when we sighted a 7-Eleven on the side of the road. The signboard looked a bit old and rusty, but the store looked in top condition. I was also getting thirsty, so I decided to listen to him and park the car in the front parking area of the store. As we were getting out of the car, the door got stuck for some reason. We tried for a few minutes. It wasn't opening. I think even our car is tired from stopping so much. Should we continue driving now? I said in a sarcastic voice. Okay, but let's just try one last time. If the door still doesn't open, then we will continue driving, Peter said. I took his advice and gave it another try, and the door opened. We got out of the car and started walking toward the entry gate of 7-Eleven, and that was when the light on the signboard started to fluctuate. I know what you guys may be thinking, but no, we did not think that it was something haunted. Instead, we thought that they should change this old junk. As we walked inside, we saw a gorgeous woman at the cash counter turning her face toward us and saying welcome in her soft voice. I admired her beauty for a minute or so, but then I walked ahead to grab the drinks. And as I was grabbing the drinks, I thought that I should buy edibles as well, because you never know when Peter asked me for the fourth stop. After that, he might feel hungry. So I just went ahead and grabbed some cookies and chips for us, and then walked toward the cash counter. I was not surprised to see that Peter was giving it his all with flirting with this girl, but she wasn't giving him a response and was completely focused on staring at a blue pen that was lying around at the counter. It felt a bit weird to me, but I think Peter wasn't going to budge from there because of any reason. I went ahead and she started billing the products. That was when some weird bad smell hit my nose, and I looked around to see if something was spoiled over there, but everything looked fresh and clean to me. I looked over at Peter and the girl, but they did not seem bothered by it, so I thought that it must be my imagination. After the billing was done, I made my payment and started to walk out of the door, but Peter was still standing there trying to talk to her. "Dude, are you coming or should I just leave you behind?" I said in frustration, because the longer we stayed here, the later we would be at the wedding and Marcus would kill us. Peter looked at me and silently walked closer. I thought he was going to leave with me, but then he said, "Can't you be a little late for your best friend? Don't you know how long it's been since I had sex? Please, a little help here. Just wait for a few minutes, and if she does not respond, then I will leave with you." I had no other choice because I could not leave this shit of a person behind, so I said fine and stood there waiting. 15 minutes passed, but the girl did not give him any response, so I had to drag him out of the place. I could still smell that stench that was just getting stronger, but I still left the place. We drove out of the place and Peter's face was still down, as if I'd just made him drink poison or something. "Sam, pass me the drink. By the way, did you smell something bad there?" Peter finally spoke after 10 minutes of silence, which was the longest he had stayed silent till now. "Yeah, I also smelled it. It was like something was spoiled in there," I replied while taking out the drink from the carry bag and handing it to him. The drink felt warm by touch. Felt a bit weird. But then I thought it must be because of the time that had passed since we bought the drinks. "You're right, but everything looked fresh and fine to me." He tried to open the can, but it broke, and I turned my head only to see that it was rust and that bad smell had spread throughout the car. "Ugh, what the hell is that? What did you grab from there when I was distracted, Sam?" Peter said while making a disgusted and freaked out face. "No, when I picked them up they were just fine. Wait a sec, let me check the other packages." I immediately picked up the bag and saw that it was also in very bad condition, which I instantly threw outside the car window. I was panicking inside, but I told Peter that I may not have noticed it. I know he was freaked out too, but we both acted calm and continued driving in complete silence. After attending the wedding, when we were coming back and passing through the same place in the middle of the day, we noticed 7-Eleven wasn't there. Instead, there was a burned building. I stopped the car and asked around about that. The people who used to live here told us that there used to be a 7-Eleven here about 6 months ago, but a fire broke out and it burned. During the fire, a cashier girl who used to work there got stuck and she died there. She told us that the girl was extremely beautiful. Peter and I looked at each other. Sweat had started to drip from our faces, and we quietly went back inside the car.
I got a few work-related stories from my hometown I can post. This first one happened when I was a 20-year-old college student. At the time, I worked in a, let's say, rustic-looking gas station. It wasn't a building by itself either. Rather, it acted more like a booth that was attached to a supermarket. The booth itself is located a bit off-site on the other side of this huge parking lot, but the supermarket owns it. The booth faces the store, but it has a huge woodland area directly behind it. The door to the booth faces left into the woods, and I know I'm being overly specific, but this is important. So the window in the booth is bulletproof, but only covers the front so you can't see directly to the left or right of the booth. At the time of this experience, I'd been working at the station for maybe a few months, when all of a sudden, this nasty storm hit the area one night. The rain was so bad that you could barely see 10 feet in front of you, and it was flooding all over the place. But the supermarket, being desperate for money, refused to close the booth down, so I showed up for my typical 5 to 11 p.m. shift in the pouring rain. 3 hours into my shift, the power goes out due to the storm, which by this point has gotten downright apocalyptic. It's pitch black out there, and the rain is coming down hard, so I decided to sit tight in the booth while I wait for a manager or something to either let me go or to fix the power. Of course, this means the phones are down, so I can't call in the store, and nobody in their right mind is buying gas, so I decided to start doing my booth chores like cleaning the counter, counting cigarettes, tidying the drawer, etc. Now, this next part will require a bit more background information, so bear with me. The booth itself is supposed to be locked at all times, but one of the new hires managed to break the key off inside the lock, making one of our managers break the lock so we all could get back inside. That lock still hadn't been replaced, but we were told to pretend the door was still locked. The door still had a deadbolt, but I found it annoying to fool with, so I mostly just left it unlocked. Whenever I'd go to open the door, I'd pretend to put the key in and make an audible ksh sound like a lock being opened. Anyway, back to me sitting in the unlocked booth in the pitch-black pouring rain. I'm in the middle of my chores when I hear something outside the booth, like a muffled sort of splashing sound. Again, there is zero visibility, so I press my ear against the door and I can clearly hear someone walking around the booth, in the rain, before stopping in front of the door. Before I can kick myself for not locking it, I hear that ksh sound, followed by the most dreadfully quiet couple of seconds. I'm just waiting to die at the hands of some deranged serial killer or crackhead, when suddenly, the footsteps start splashing back into the woods. I quietly soil myself as I race to lock the deadbolt and I wait out my shift. I would occasionally hear the footsteps outside, but it never tried to open the door. Finally, my manager drives over in a truck to close me out for the night. Since I'm still kind of new here, I didn't want to seem like I was delusional or crazy or that I was a crackhead, so I never mentioned it to him or anyone else at the store. A few months later, this kid I was training told me he'd heard footsteps real late one night during a storm, and thankfully, the lock had been replaced since then. I just tell him it was nothing, but not to open the door if he thinks there is something out there. Not because I didn't want to look delusional, but because I can't explain this phenomenon. Now fast forward a couple of months, and I'm still working at the booth. By this point, I'm the second oldest person working there, so sometimes I'd get calls from younger coworkers when they accidentally mess up. On this particular night I was off, but I still got a call from this high schooler who I'll call Rhea. I look at the time and it's 9:30, so I sigh and pick up the phone, and before I can even get in a what happened, Rhea is in hysterics, saying something about her trainee being missing, and then lots of sobbing. Confused, if not a little agitated that she called me first, I try to get her to call the cops or something if he's been kidnapped, but she insists that she can't call the cops because they wouldn't believe her. So, my next line of thinking is to ask her why she hasn't told a manager, and she cries some more and says that they wouldn't understand. More agitated than confused, I agreed to go out there and calm her down. I get dressed, go out there, and park next to the booth. There were no customers around, and the girl was just standing in the booth, staring at the door. She spots me, opens the door, and starts sobbing, telling me to hurry inside. Eventually, I got her to stop crying long enough to tell me what happened. Apparently, she was training this new guy, Matt, who was an older guy about my age, and she said, the dude felt off, like a robot or something, and kept staring at her all dazed. Several times he would stop talking mid-sentence and ignored her attempts to address it. At this point, she's getting real uncomfortable and is about to call into the store about him when he starts sort of humming, she says. She described it as kind of like as if someone was attempting to imitate a purring cat, like they were breathing heavily and buzzing at the same time. So she reaches for the phone, and he reacts by grabbing her hand and just staring at her. She starts bawling at this point, begging him to stop, and he lets go of her hand, then opens the door, and just sprints off into the woods out of sight. She said he came back a few minutes just before I got there and asked to be let back in, but she refused, so he just ran back into the woods. At this point, I'm either thinking he picked up on the meth phase that the neighborhood was slinging around or that she's being dramatic. Regardless, the story sounded pretty dangerous and we needed to call the cops or something at least. I tell her we're going to call the cops and then we're going to walk outside and wait for them, but she doesn't want to go outside. She says that she can almost feel him waiting out there. Tired, irritated, and not really buying the story, I just say screw it. She can stay in the booth and call the cops while I make sure the tree line is clear. I take this weak little flashlight that I stashed out there after the first story and go outside to start scanning the tree line. I barely begin shining the light around when suddenly the hair stands up on the back of my neck as I hear this humming noise. She described it rather well too, because it sounded kind of like cicadas mixed with breathing. I look inside the booth and she's curled up in the chair, staring to my left. I didn't even look where she was staring, I just immediately booked it back to get inside. But I left the keys with her, and she's not getting up to let me in. I'm pounding on the door while screaming at her to let me in, and the humming stops abruptly as I hear something behind me and to the left. It's Matt. He's standing just on the edge of the trees. My panic intensifies, and at this point, Rhea finally lets me into the booth, and I immediately deadbolt the thing shut. All of a sudden, Matt is right outside asking to be let back in. He says he's sorry, and that he got a bit nervous back there, and he begins circling the booth while he just repeats the same couple of excuses, asking to come in. This continues for maybe 5 minutes before the cops arrive, and Matt just begins to run off into the woods again. I end up having to explain to both the cops and our manager what happened, leaving out the weird humming. As far as I know, Matt never showed up, so they fired him and Rhea quit eventually, and that was the end of it. I was never particularly close to Rhea since she was still in high school when I was in college, so we never got to talk about what happened. I have no idea what happened that night though. Maybe Matt was just some doped up meth junkie who was capable of making some really weird noises. I'll never know. I guess it could explain why he bolted out of there when the cops began to show up, but that day is still quite a mystery to my mind. This was a few years ago, just after I'd left college. I'd been working at Walmart for a while before moving to the customer service counter. My first holiday season was almost my last. After experiencing the post-Christmas returns period, I threatened to quit if my boss didn't move me out. Thankfully, she relented and I was given my own department. That's where I would stay until the next year's returns rush. I was doing my regular thing in electronics when my boss came to me for a favor. One of the girls scheduled to work customer service had just quit on the spot. She couldn't spare anyone else, and she knew I'd worked there before. I told her no before she could even finish, but she continued to beg. As one last desperate move, she offered to give me New Year's Eve and day off. It was an offer too good to refuse, and I reluctantly agreed. In spite of the desk being backed up to the doors, my fellow coworker and I were blowing through the line fast. People seemed to be a bit nicer than they had the previous year. That was until I began assisting this unkempt-looking man. He had a car seat for a toddler that he wanted to return. The guy seemed a little out of it. I had asked him twice about the receipt before he pulled this crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. I unfolded it and began the refund process. As I took the seat from the counter and sat it in a nearby basket, I made a passing comment to a coworker about the guy returning it because he needed to get high. It was just something that I expected from the area, something to that effect. I know it was in bad taste, but my coworker laughed and I returned to the counter to give the guy his money. He was staring a hole through me and gritting his teeth. He said, "I heard that. I'd watch your back if I were you." I could tell he meant business. I didn't want to draw attention, so I apologized under my breath and quickly handed him his money. Before he was able to say anything else, I called for the next customer. He reluctantly stepped away but remained close by, continuing to give me a death stare for several minutes. There was something about the look that terrified me. Although I kept working, a feeling of nausea boiled in my guts until he finally left. The next 3 hours dragged by, and because of the incident, my mood had taken a drastic downturn. I was overjoyed to see it end, but terrified of what may await me outside. There was no way I was going to my car alone. I went to seek out a coworker that I'd been dating on and off for a while. He agreed to walk me out to my car, and we stopped just inside the doors to look out. I didn't see the guy, so we continued on. The two of us stopped again briefly, but there was still no sign of him anywhere. Customers were coming and going, driving by us. Nothing looked off, and we headed across the lot to my car. I was relieved and beginning to think that I had just been overreacting. I knew it was a stupid thing to say, but I didn't know what the outcome would be. Then a car came out of nowhere and began racing up from behind us. The headlights were blinding, and I just began to panic and I froze. And if it wasn't for my companion, I may have been run down. He pushed me between two cars, following close behind. As the car sped by, the driver hurled a disgusting name at me and disappeared onto the access road. I thanked my hero and slowly got back to my feet. He insisted that we call the cops, but I refused. As stupid as it may sound, I was afraid involving them could cost me my job. But allow me to explain. I've been chewed out for being rude to customers before. I would have to explain why the man was so angry to me. If my boss heard what I'd said, I'd definitely lose my promised 2 days off and probably be fired. Rightfully so, I guess. Of course, I could lie and play dumb, but that never works out in the end. I decided to wager on the chance that he was done with me and would move on. And that turned out to be the case, fortunately. Various coworkers continued to walk me to my car after that shift. 2 months passed before I figured I was safe and returned to going solo. To this day, I've not seen that man again and hope never to. Whether I just got lucky or he never intended to kill me, I'll likely never know. Either way, I'm just happy to be alive. My attitude towards strangers changed after that incident, and for the remainder of my time working directly with customers, I made a concerted effort to treat them with respect. I suggest you take this story to heart. We may all have our little episodes of disrespect when dealing with our fellow person. Nobody's perfect. I'm definitely not. But keep in mind, however, you never really know what a stranger is capable of. One arrogant little slip could cost you your life.